Konnichiwa. Welcome. Chieko Takamura, a feminist in psychoanalytic analysis. Chieko looks far off. Every day there's a blue sky, high above Mount Atatara. That's what I call the real sky, she says. She's like a child when she talks about the sky. Kotaro Takamura, talking like a child. Chieko Takamura was born in Nihon Matsu, Fukushima Prefecture, Japan, 1886. As a child, she was competitive, intelligent, talented. In school, she was exceptionally considerate and forward-thinking. She displayed early signs of artistic skill, but she was an odd sort. When she talked, she would bend her neck, focus her eyes on the ground, and would place her right hand below her mouth. She would barely project, and her sentences would die away. Despite her strange behavior and weak speaking voice, she would gain the honor of delivering her high school valedictorian address in 1903. Takamura's courage would carry her through her first public speaking engagement and towards Tokyo, where she chose to attend Nihon Joshi Daigaku, Japan Women's College. At 17, she packed her bags and enrolled in the first liberal arts women's college in Japan. She spent the next 4 years studying oil painting and figure drawing. She focused her studies on Western art techniques, incorporating styles from artists like Cezanne. After graduating in 1907, she chose to continue her education at the Pacific Painting Research Institute. On the left is the untitled drawing of a nude male figure standing in contrapposto. His weight rests on the right leg, while the left is bent and turned outward. Both hands are clasped together, resting on his right hip. His head is turned toward the left and angled downward. On the right is a drawing of a plaster figure model, aptly titled Plaster Figure Drawing. The figure is a nude female torso, turned sideways to face the left side of the canvas. The head is slightly angled up and to the right with eyes closed. Heavy shadow covers the left side of the face and back, while the chest and right side of the face are highlighted. They were both drawn during her tenure as a student at the Institute from 1907 to 1914. But I was unable to find written records of the medium of the drawings. There aren't many written records of Chieko Takamura's work, but these drawings appear to be charcoal, possibly with graphite used as well. Often working from live models, Takamura adopted a hyper-realistic style. Contrary to the norm, she didn't flinch at reproducing accurate anatomy, including the model's genitalia. She didn't flinch as she took her time examining her subjects and recording every detail to the best of her ability. Takamura's paintings were less realistic, garnering comment and criticism by teachers and classmates. The 1913 oil painting Kuzu is a tree bright and vivid with color. Takamura layered the brushstrokes to texturize the blue sky and white clouds. Every stroke is easily visible and distinguishable, creating a sense of chaotic movement. The greenish brown of the tree bark is flatter and draws the eye towards the top left and right of the painting. The influence of Western artists is present in her brushwork and her use of color. She also enjoyed adding green to her paintings, to an excessive degree. Takamura's instructors disliked her fascination with the color and would often direct her to use alternative colors. But the young painter was audacious and would surreptitiously add more green when her instructors were helping other students. A world of truth suddenly reveals itself upon us, full of light, full of blessing, every separate thing joined in unison. Kotaro Takamura, In Praise of Love. While at university, Takamura joined the New Women's Movement. At the turn of the 20th century, Japan experienced their first wave feminist movement, where women were more educated and sought better opportunities in careers, education, and political participation. Their fight for change and advancements led to their title, New Women, and the university was considered a breeding ground for these untraditional, scholarly women. It was at the university where Takamura met Hiratsuka Raicho. Now, Raicho was heavily involved in the feminist movement, advocating and campaigning for equal rights. In 1911, Raicho invited Takamura to design the first issue cover of the Seito Magazine. The all-women's literary magazine was founded by Raicho after she joined Saitosha in Japan. Saitosha were the new women fighting for equality. They shaped the movement after the Bluestocking Society in Western Europe. It was through Saitosha Raicho became motivated to create an independent space for women to express themselves freely, separate from the traditional male-dominated literary world. For the cover of the Seito magazine, Takamura wanted to represent the freedom of expression in womanhood. She drew a woman standing independently, in a long dress free of sleeves, with her hair tied, braided, and falling well below the waist. She wears a crown-like headband, with jewelry dangling from her hair. Her left hand rests on her left shoulder, and her right is lifted and gripping the corner of a handkerchief that falls to the floor. Her strong, almost rigid stance presents an air of independence and courage. Her long hair and dress and jewelry maintain her femininity, without lessening her power and strength symbolized in the crown. Normally, a woman looking away from the viewer with chin held high would be viewed as arrogant and overconfident. But this woman represents pride and freedom. In a world where women are viewed and consumed by men, and women are meant to cater to men, Takamura depicts a woman with the ability to choose who she acknowledges. This drawing is about choice. This drawing is about choosing not to accommodate the male gaze, and still take pride and comfort in femininity and womanhood. After Saitosha and the Seito magazine, Chieko met and married Kotaro Takamura. Born to a famous sculptor in 1883, Kotaro learned his father's trade and became a sculptor himself while studying poetry. In his mid-20s, Kotaro traveled to New York, London, and Paris, where he studied under several different Western artists like Rodin, but returned to Japan 3 years later. He taught Western art and poetry, and joined a group of artists and writers called the Pan Club. Through a mutual associate of the club, he met Chieko Naganuma. Not much is known of their courtship, but it is believed that the reciprocal desire for personal freedom created a deep connection. At this time, Chieko was under pressure to find a husband. She was 26 years old, well past the proper age for a woman to marry. Her parents had a suitor waiting for her in her hometown, but Chieko could not bear the loss of freedom or the traditional life awaiting her. Kotaro offered her an extraordinary life with a shining future. After her marriage, Chieko disappeared from the public world. She rarely left the house and limited her interactions to her family and brother-in-law. The only significant accounts of their life together are letters and interviews from family members, old friends, neighbors, and Kotaro's poetry and essays. We can savor the sweetness of our love, unraveling every complication, living naturally and freely like the blowing of the winds, our inner needs, the promptings of our thoughts. There is wisdom in nature. There is prudence in nature. Kotaro Takamura, early evening. Chieko Takamura's art style changed after marriage. Her preferred medium became colored paper cutouts. She had a love for life and chose to depict nature vividly with as much detail as the medium allowed. Both Chieko and Kotaro Takamura believed the purest form of art was art that represented the self, creating from the unconscious. Desire, emotion, and thought needed to be visualized in their art. Part of their shared philosophy also included nature being the purest form of life. To exist without it was to cease to exist. Now, traditionally, Japanese art and culture represented the connection between nature and the human spirit. The spirit matures with prolonged contact with nature. The Takamuras lived that philosophy and were diligent in representing their beliefs in their art. In these paper cutouts, Chieko Takamura layers the papers to provide more depth and to create the illusion of pressed flowers. She leaves narrow spaces between petals and stems to aid in the illusion of depth, and is careful to leave the shape and edges ragged and unperfected to provide a more realistic feel to them. The vibrant and boldly colored flowers provide a strong contrast between the background and are balanced with softer, paler colors. The boldness is meant to draw the eye and guide the viewer through the piece, while the softer and paler colors invite the viewer to look closely and notice the finer details in the art. Chieko's now lost her mind. She has no words to use. She flaps her hands, calling the magpies and plovers to her. The forest windbreak slopes down. A mass of yellow pine pollen streams through the air. The 99-mile beach smokes in the bright May breeze. Chieko's summer kimono darts in and out of the pines, and the white sand or pine truffles. I slowly follow after Chieko, picking up the pine truffles. The magpies and plovers are Chieko's friends. For Chieko, who has given up being human, the frighteningly clear morning air is a wonderful place to wander. Chieko flitters and flies like a bird. Kotaro Takamura. Chieko rides the wind. In 1918, Chieko Takamura's father died, and her family struggled to support themselves. Chieko regularly wrote to her mother and sent money and supplies to her family without Kotaro's knowledge. It was around this time that the letters and Kotaro's later poems began to show signs of Chieko's developing psychosis. She struggled to eat and sleep. She would scream or sing loudly for hours at a time, and she would have unpredictable convulsions. Her paper cutouts show the consequence of her psychosis, living as a ghost of herself. Her connection to nature wasn't completely lost, just as her life was not completely gone, but the vibrance and complexity was lost in her art. 2 pears and 3 apples in a bowl are flat and simplistic. The detail is lost, and all that's left is solid color placed atop solid color. Takamura attempts to record her connection, her experience with nature, and all she has to give is a basic representation. Simple shapes, solid color, nothing more. In 1931, she attempted suicide. Later that same year, she was diagnosed with symptoms of schizophrenia. In 1932, she stops making art and was barely recognizable to anyone who formerly knew her. In 1935, Kotaro commits her to a psychiatric hospital. She begins medical treatments for her diagnosis, and after a few years of treatments and care, her creativity returned. She began to make paper cutouts of fish, trees, and vegetables, among other things. The color and detail returned to a limited degree as she experienced life again and her connection to nature was revitalized. Chieko Takamura never returned home. She died in the hospital at 52 years old. At her deathbed, Kotaro Takamura wrote, "You had been so waiting for a lemon. In your sad and white and bright deathbed, your perfect teeth bit with a crunch into the lemon you took from my hand. A topaz-colored scent arose. Those few drops of heavenly lemon juice suddenly made you normal again. Your shining, lucid eyes smiled gently. You gripped my hand with such a healthy strength, though there was a storm in your throat. In these last moments of your life, you became the old Chieko again. You focused a life of love into one moment, and then you took a big breath, like on the mountain peaks long ago. And in that breath, your engine shut down. Today, once again, under the cherry blossoms by your photograph, I'll put a coldly shining lemon. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you.